Hello, everyone, and welcome to another virtual event at the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm John Charles, and I'm delighted to have with us today a veritable galaxy of cozy stars for our CozyCon 2021. Our authors today are Angela M. Sanders, Olivia Black, Abby Vandiver, or some might call her Abby Colette, Darci Hannah, and Renee Patrick, who, when they're at home, are Vince and Rosemarie Keenan. Welcome.
Thanks for having us, John.
My first question to you that we'll start off with is, I'd like you to tell us and our audience listening a little bit about yourselves before you became a best-selling author. And why don't we start with Angela?
Well, thank you. I love that best-selling author part. That might be in the future, but I grew up in a rural area in a single wide trailer, and then ended up as a congressional investigator for 11 and a half years in Washington, D.C. I moved back west because it turned out that the daily life was a lot more important to me than what was happening next to the Superfund bill. And at that point, I began my downward mobility as I then went to work for an art college and then started writing grants for a nonprofit. And then finally started writing magazine articles and mystery novels. And so now I am poorer and happier than I have ever been.
Okay, Olivia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Olivia Black, and I have a little rescue puggle dog. You can probably actually hear her coming in right now. She demands my attention about 23 hours out of the day. So that's pretty much what I do. She even has her own Instagram. So when I'm writing, she's probably on my lap or she's curled up at my feet. And then when I'm not writing, I do read a lot, and usually the puggle is trying to help me read, which is very helpful. I enjoy crochet, which is, for me, it's a great way to kind of get out of my head for a minute and stop thinking about plots. And then if hockey's on, I'm definitely watching hockey. So we know what I'm doing after this.
Abby, what would you like to tell us about yourself?
So I used to be a lawyer, and I used to be a college professor of economics. And I find that writing about murder is so much better than defending murderers. So I'm kind of stuck with that. I got into writing just because I got sick, and I just didn't have anything to do, laying around trying to get better. And so I found that I love doing that so much better than economics and being a lawyer. So that's how I got here.
Darci, how about you?
Goodness, you guys are also brilliant. I was a project manager for a pre-press industries to produce car books and things like that. And then when I became a stay-home mom, I have 3 sons. They were little at the time. I was pregnant with one. That's when I got the bug to write. I loved reading, and I loved reading giant sweeping historical fiction. And so that's what I started writing. So I had spent some time researching and writing this giant, I think it was 1,000-page 18th century epic that I tried to sell. And that didn't go so well. I got a lot of reviews on that. Wrote something smaller, and then I became a historical fiction novelist. And I know one of your questions is about the process. I'm not going to ruin my story for you, but I'm writing cozy mysteries now, and I love it. I never thought I'd write cozy mysteries. I'm still a mom. I've had many jobs. I love baking. I worked with my brother in his bakery. I work at a library. I kind of jump in where I'm needed, but I just, for some reason, I really love telling stories. And I consider myself more a storyteller than a writer. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's great. What about Vince and Rosemarie?
I'm Rosemarie Keenan.
And I'm Vince Keenan. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, it's been a long day.
Yes, we are married. Actually, we are celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary a week from tomorrow.
So congratulations.
We're both from New York, but we did not know each other there.
No, we met in Florida, where we happened to both be working for the same advertising agency. And we moved out here to Seattle about 30 years ago, actually. And my day job is at a nonprofit. It's a cancer center here in Seattle. And Vince has always been a writer.
Yes, I'm the editor-in-chief of Noir City, which is the magazine of the Film Noir Foundation, which is an organization started by Turner Classic Movies host Eddie Muller. And when we're not watching movies or writing about movies, we are drinking cocktails or watching the New York Mets. And that's us.
That's it.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your latest book. And let's start with Vince and Rosemarie this time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, our latest book is The Sharpest Needle, and it's the 4th book in our Lillian Frost and Edith Head mystery series. And it's set in 1939 Hollywood.
Yes, Orson Welles has just arrived in Hollywood and is casting around for something to make his debut film about. And as this is happening, Lillian and Edith are pressed into service by Marion Davies to investigate a series of poison pen letters. Ironically enough, here we are under the aegis of poison pen. And as they start investigating these letters, it spirals into murder and any number of other crimes. And as is usual the case with the Renee Patrick books, there are plenty of star cameos, lots of jokes, and gowns galore.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness.
Darci?
Oh, well, my latest book is Murder at the Beacon Bake Shop. I don't know if you can see that. It's a fun, cozy mystery set in a small town called Beacon Harbor, which is fictitious in Michigan. So the premise is my heroine, Lindsay Bakewell, she's a New York City investment banker, and she's got, everything going for her. She's in her mid-30s. She's got a celebrity chef boyfriend. And it's her birthday, and her celebrity chef boyfriend has his own restaurant, and she goes in and finds him in a compromising position with his pastry chef. And so she gets mad, goes home, drinks a bottle of wine, goes a little shopping on the internet, and the next morning she wakes up the owner of a lighthouse in Michigan, which you really can buy some lighthouses online. That's why, so I thought it'd be fun. So she decides to change careers and, turn the lighthouse into a bakery, and that's where her adventure starts. So.
Abby, what's new for you?
Well, the last book that came out is A Game of Cones, and I am not that witty. I did not think of that name, but I love it. And it's the second book in my an ice cream parlor mystery. My stories are centered around family that owns an ice cream shop in the real city of Chagrin Falls near Cleveland, where I live. And there is really a waterfall there that bisects the city, the little village. And so bodies are popping up everywhere around the falls, although it's in real life, I must say this, it's a very nice little place. I don't know that any murder has happened in Chagrin Falls until I came along. And now there's hopefully will be lots of murders there. And there's a body found in an alley. The guy came to town to try to erect a vertical mall. And, as we all know, in cozy mysteries, you have to have a quaint little village, or a town where you live. And so a vertical mall just doesn't equate to quaint. So no one there wants it. And he ends up dead in an alley. And a friend of the main characters from New York comes to try to pull her back to her job in New York. And she steps in the blood in her red bottom shoes. And of course, she is a suspect, and it's amateur sleuth time, and everybody's trying to figure out who done it.
That's great. Olivia, what about you?
So see if I can get this in frame. So Killer Content is a cozy mystery, and it follows Odessa Dean, who is a Louisiana transplant to Brooklyn. So kind of turns the moving to the quaint town like Abby has on its head there. So she gets to Brooklyn, and one of her fellow waitresses is caught falling to her death in the back of a proposal video that then goes viral. So everybody's upset, but Odessa doesn't really know how to deal with her feelings. So to cope with it, she decides to look into this death that everybody is saying is an accident. Of course, it's not. It's murder. It's a murder book. Trigger warning. So Killer Content, I love that it's set in Brooklyn and that it's got a 23-year-old main character. And she relies heavily on social media from Twitter to Venmo in order to solve the crimes.
What about you, Angela?
Well, first I want to say, in listening to everybody's stories, point out that I have a BA in economics. That's for Abby, which is sort of interesting. And then for Renee, Patrick, and your alter egos, I have a series of books that are vintage clothing mysteries, and the designer, and one of them, each is named after a designer, is Edith Head. It's called Head Case. So I feel like I have a little bond with at least some of you.
That's great.
So my latest book is hopefully light side, is Bait and Witch, which features Josephine Way, Josie, who's a librarian at the Library of Congress, and deep in the stacks. When I was a congressional investigator, I'd spent some time in the stacks of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and they go down, down, down. I mean, and because it's like eight floors deeper underground, and it is pitch black. So Josie, when she's deep in the stacks, overhears a conversation she's not supposed to. And she runs for her life, escapes on the down low to tiny Wilfred, Oregon, to be the librarian of a library, which happens to be in an old timber baron's mansion, because why not? If you're making up a library, it might as well be a Victorian mansion with the magic cat, by the way. And but she gets there and discovers that the library is actually slated for demolition in about a month. So, and then of course, the bodies start showing up. And at the same time, Josie has broken a spell that was put on her and realizes that she's a witch, and her magic comes from books. So that was really fun to write. 7-Year Witch this is the arc. It's going to come out August 22nd. Thank you.
Yay.
Every successful series is usually got some anchor in the form of a hook, or something about it that carries the reader from book to book. Can you talk a little bit about what this is in your new series? And we'll start with you, Angela.
Well, in a bookstore in Portland, which is where I live, Portland, Oregon, on one of the steps, I saw the quote once, books by Alice Hoffman, books are the only real magic. And that is sort of the hook of this. When creating a witch, I didn't want a witch who, like, boom, and she can make anything happen. I mean, obviously, you don't want that in a murder mystery. I would say, you're the murderer, poof, now you're on death row. But she has her magic that she can barely manage that comes from books. And the magic comes from the energy that readers give it and that authors give it. So books talk to her. And of course, some books are not very interesting to listen to, like telephone directories, and some are very exciting, and some smooch a lot and are romantic. But the hook here is that books talk to Josie.
What about you, Olivia?
So the Brooklyn Murder Mystery series takes place in a bookstore / cafe in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So everything kind of happens in and around this cafe. And so I guess the hook is kind of the whole craft beer at the cafe where you're buying books and you're hanging out all day, which is absolutely where I want to be right now. But also, because everybody has their own skills, we've got the chef keeps bees, and Odessa, the main character, makes her own clothes. So there's a lot of eclectic interest. There's a lot of soap making that takes place in killer content. So I kind of borrowed a bunch of different hooks and then tied them all together from these people that work at the cafe.
What about you, Abby?
Ice cream. Need I say more?
Well,
No,
a little bit.
But I had the hardest time grasping the concept of hook, because I self-published for 25 books or so. And you just write what you want to write when you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. Who knew there were rules to writing? So when I finally got an agent and she said, you have to come up with a hook. Oh, I just grappled with that. I couldn't figure it out. So ice cream, it's a hook for everybody.
Yeah, we'll ask Darci.
Oh, Abby, I love that. Ice cream's your hook. And hook is very interesting because I grappled with that too, coming from historical fiction. And I had written a series and I had set it on a golf course. And this is my first pitch as a cozy mystery to to a different agent than the agent I had. And the agent goes, look, I like this, but you need a hook. She goes, you set your mystery on a golf course. Golf is a leisure time pursuit, and leisure time pursuits don't sell. so what's your hook? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, it's kind of like Caddyshack meets, Scooby-Doo. That's how I kind of pitched it. And I'm like, had to take out the Caddyshack element and think deeper. And I'm like, well, I said it in a town called Cherry Cove. Can I use cherries as my hook? And she did a quick Google search because a lot of people use food, and I can get behind food, obviously. My hook is a bakery and bake shop, but I just found it interesting. She goes, yeah, nobody has the cherry, so you get the cherry. So cherries was the hook for that one. And that kind of got me thinking along the lines of hooks and how important a hook is. Because readers, I like that consistency. So I love baking. That's one of my favorite things in the world to do. I don't know why I shouldn't be baking all the time. But I figured like that was one of the skills I had that I could, entertain people. I entertain people in real life with it. So I thought it'd be fun to have a woman who puts a bakery in a lighthouse, because lighthouses are another passion of mine, having written about them for a long time. Also, my brother was a ghost hunter and a baker and did a lot of these. He was also worked on Wall Street. And so this is my younger brother. And so we talk all the time. And so I work in a haunted library for real. And so I love a slight element of paranormal. So everything I do has a slight element of paranormal in it. And so every lighthouse that I've been to, I always ask the keepers or the docents to say, hey, who still lives here? Like, tell me your ghost story. And so we spent hours talking about things, they will give a tour, and it's not a ghost tour, but I know better. Everybody hears something at a lighthouse. So of course my lighthouse, the first resident, the first keeper of the Beacon Harbor Lighthouse is still there. And that's something that my character discovers as she goes along as she, opens up her bakery, and she doesn't believe in ghosts, but eventually that's part of the story. And so that element, the lights, and this is actually true. I'm not true, if you believe in ghosts. There is a lighthouse in Michigan that has ghost lights. It is not my myth, so I use that. Mine is fictitious. It's based on a real lighthouse, but the ghost lights, when they're seen, are in real life a portent of danger. And I'm like, that's awesome. So that is an element that I keep. And so whenever these ghost lights are seen by somebody, Lindsay Bakewell, who's just busy baking her, her stuff, trying to keep away from the ghost that lives there. They have a little agreement, but she, whenever she sees those lights, she's pretty certain something's going to happen in her small town. So baking, lighthouse, maybe the captain who still lives there is going to be the hook, and that's going to be continuous throughout the story, and her friends, and her Newfoundland. So that's my hook.
Thank you. Rosemarie and Vince.
Well, our hook is a real person. And I think we would recommend this actually as an approach, right?
Yeah.
It's worked really well for us. We started with Edith Head, who was a real life costume designer and the most honored woman in the history of the Academy Awards. She's got 35 nominations and 8 wins, and more importantly, has the most amazing career that started in the 1920s and ended in 1981. And over the course of that career, she basically dressed every major actress of note and collaborated closely with some of the greatest directors in movie history. Billy Wilder,
Alfred Hitchcock,
Preston Sturges.
Wow.
And so this allows us to just kind of go through her career and bring on anybody that we want as a character. But we also knew that she needed a sassy leg woman sidekick.
Right, someone who could, so Edith, of course, worked nonstop, right, because that was her job. So someone who could go out and actually talk to people and interview people and look at crime scenes and stuff while Edith was back at the studio.
And Archie Goodwin to Edith's Nero Wolfe. And so we went back to our roots and came up with Lillian Frost, who is from Queens, New York, where we're both from, and where Paramount originally started. There was originally a studio in Astoria that's now part of the Motion Picture Museum there. And so she comes to Los Angeles to be an actress, is absolutely terrible at being an actress. But crosses paths with Edith, ends up becoming the social secretary to the kind of millionaire that you see in all of the comedies of the 1930s. And so between the two of them, basically any name person we want from Hollywood history, we can get into the book. And that's kind of the hook.
And that's so much fun.
I have a question about that. Do you look up the real personality of the actors that you use, or personalities, or do you just kind of make it up like you think they would, how they would act?
That's a great question, Abby, because we were really concerned about that when we started. We do want to try to capture what the real person was, while at the same time nodding towards what we all think they were like.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that proved really helpful to us actually is old time radio, because all of the stars would go on radio shows as themselves and play exaggerated versions of themselves. And that's a great way to figure out how to design the character when they show up. They're a little bit bigger.
You can still access those radio shows, huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
the internet is lousy with them. They're everywhere. They're actually great to listen to. Like the way other people listen to podcasts, we listen to radio shows.
And old Jack Benny shows from the 40s.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, Abby,
Sorry, I took over asking
No.
questions.
that was a good segue because I wanted to talk a little bit about research, and Vince and Rosemarie have said a little bit, but can you tell us, we'll start with you, researching your books, do you have specific sources for Edith Head? How do you go about researching a real time period? So research is your.
Yeah, for the latest book, for The Sharpest Needle, we actually did the most fun kind of research in that we took a trip.
Ah.
We went to San Simeon because there's a weekend at the book where Lillian is up at Hearst Castle there. And we did it in the way that would have happened like in the late 30s, in that we took a train from Los Angeles and then went up the coast to Northern California. And it was a beautiful train ride, but it kind of gave us the feel for what it would have been like to just approach there from Los Angeles.
It wasn't exact because we were not met at the train station by a fleet of limousines that then drove us up to San Simeon, which is what would have happened back in the day. We tried to set it up. People just wouldn't
It
meet our
wasn't gonna
terms.
happen. Yeah.
But in terms of Edith Head, we have actually been really fortunate in that, first of all, she left a lot of her papers to the Motion Picture Academy. So they're tired of seeing us at the Academy Library in Los Angeles. We go down there every chance we get and go through all of her papers, letters between her and her husband. We once found like a passport photograph of her that we'd never seen before. It's like an incredibly arresting image. And we're also very lucky in that we were introduced to the archivists at Paramount Pictures, who have been a phenomenal help to us. They welcomed us with open arms. It's still one of the great days of our life, I think.
They took us into the wardrobe archive, which they have there, and they don't get a lot of support from Paramount to keep it up. So it's kind of a cramped little room, but they pulled out costumes. We got to actually touch a costume that Barbara Stanwyck wore in The Lady Eve, which is one of my favorite movies. So it was great.
Yeah, so we're lucky in that there are resources we can go to that are open to sharing everything they have with us.
What about you, Darci? What kinds of research do you have to do? Recipe research?
No, thank you. Eating and baking, that's the research I do. And I make sure everybody, I share those out. So I'm like, did that work? Did that work for you? But lighthouses, I go to a lot of lighthouses, drive up the coast. The best kind of research is visiting a place and trying to get a feel for it. Books as well. But my research is just kind of ongoing. Like, if there's something that interests me, I use everything and anything. For dogs, I have dogs here, so I know a lot about dogs. So it's easy for me to write about dogs, baking, ghosts, because I talk about that. I'm not necessarily that I believe in ghosts. I don't know what I believe in, but I love talking to people who really do believe in it. And so talking to me is a great way. When I did the historical research, that's a little different, that's a little more meaty, like you guys were talking about. But for me, just, whatever I can do seems to end up in my book, so.
Abby, what about your ice cream books? Do you research the recipes? Do you do lots of testing?
Such grueling research that I do. I can hardly make it through it. I eat ice cream, and so when I first decided to do this book, I took my grandchildren. That way I knew I could sample from everyone. I wouldn't look so greedy buying a pint of everything. Yeah, so it's hard work, but I just push my way through. But I am a Google girl. I Google everything. So even when I'm writing, whatever pops up, I Google it. So I do a lot of research, and a lot of times I can get lost in my research. And I don't know, maybe that's my lawyer brain, you know, you have to figure out every angle and even what the other person would say, you know, what the other side is. So I do a lot of Googling on my phone. I'm on my laptop or desktop. I have my phone right next to me because as soon as I write a paragraph or two, oh, I should look that up, you know. So I do a lot of research, and I kind of have to control myself. I could probably go to research rehab or something. I don't know. But yeah, the hardest part was eating the ice cream.
You need to go to ice cream rehab.
Yeah.
Olivia, what research did you undertake?
So Killer Content revolves around a bookstore / cafe with a lot of beer. And so I had to visit a lot of bookstores, and I had to visit a lot of craft breweries and sample everything. I tell you, writing is hard work, man. It's just difficult. And then my next book is No Means of Escape, and it takes place in an escape room. So the murder takes place in an escape room. And so I had to go to a couple of escape rooms to do my research. Plus, my best friend and his husband are escape room junkies. So every time I had an idea, I could run it by them. And my best friend used to work in an escape room. So he would tell me the ins and outs of like what's really happening in the background and the mechanics of how they made things work. I used all of that. I just like basically ripped off his conversations and wrote a book about it. So it's all there, and he wrote that one.
Angela?
Good research.
Well, the book I'm working on right now, Witch and Famous, which is the third one. So of course it'll be a while since the first one just came out till that comes out. Involves in each of the books, Josie sort of deals with some form of magic she hasn't before. In book 2, it's curses, and this one it's love potions and love magic. So in Portland, I have a friend who's kind of a big deal witch, and she teaches at the local school of mystery, which is what a witch school is. And so I've talked with her. Well, we had some great conversations on curses, which are very interesting, but also about the ethics of love magic, which is really interesting. I never really thought about it that much. Having the ability to draw people to you, that's not love magic, that's a glamour, which is apparently something separate. And then but love magic is something that can be really powerful and can be potentially dangerous because you can subvert somebody's destiny. I mean, you can do something, you're controlling somebody else's life. So that was really interesting and not something that I thought of before. And it doesn't have to do with lipstick and high heels or any of that.
We're here today to kind of talk about cozy mysteries. How would you define a cozy mystery? What are the elements you think must be present? And we'll start this time with Angela.
You know, cozy mysteries are, you know, the traditional definition is sort of a mystery where there's not a lot of violence, there's not a lot of sex or language, and potentially in a small town with a regular sort of crew that goes with it. But then I think some people will extend that definition to talk about golden age mysteries because they do sort of follow a lot of those rules. But then nowadays, if you're talking to an agent or somebody in the publishing industry, if you talk about a cozy mystery, they want the hook that you talked about. Like there's got to be some, you know, my person is a podiatrist, you know, the famous podiatrist mysteries. So cozy mystery, I think I almost feel like it's time for a new word. Although there are people who don't know what cozy mysteries are. It's hard to believe, but I've run into a few of those. But I think a cozy mystery is something that's going to make you feel good, something that is going to be emotionally engaging, intellectually engaging because of the puzzle, but in the end, you don't feel like you've been dragged over any coals. And that's what I want to write.
Olivia?
So I actually got a great definition of cozy from a Instagram reviewer who, what was it they said? It's the Hallmark Channel of murder mysteries. I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. That's it. So I mean, it's definitely a mystery without any blood, without any gore, without any on-screen violence, which frankly is kind of a waste of my criminology degree, because I know more about blood spatter patterns and body decomp than anybody needs to know. And I can't write about any of that because there's no violence in cozies. So, you know, oh well, who hasn't wasted their degree here, right? So, but yeah, my best definition of cozies would be it's something that you can share with like your in-laws and not be embarrassed and not have to have any kind of like, oh, skip page 47, you can't read that, which is great because my in-laws are some of my biggest cheerleaders. They're probably here right now.
Abby, how would you define it?
I agree that cozy mysteries has this formulaic tilt to it. You know, certain things are supposed to be there. The amateur sleuth, you know, it's not anyone who's is a detective or has any kind of training in it, and that there's no graphic violence and no swearing, and the murder happens off stage, and it happens in a place that, you know, everyone want to live. Nice neighbors, nosy neighbors, but nice because they look out for each other, and everyone's friendly and knows each other, and you know, everyone wants to go there. It's beautiful seaside or mountaintops or whatever, you know, except for the murder, you know, that happens every book. So that's what, every 6 months or so. But I don't know that it should change names, as Angela suggested, but it's changing, certainly. And I don't know how much. I mean, there are curse words now being cuss words used in the books now that didn't happen. I think it's a little more edgier. It's more millennial focused a lot of times. They want younger protagonists. It used to always be the old lady sleuth, you know, grandma, you know, and her crew would go out and solve the murder. And I've written plenty of those, and I like those. But now you find that there's 20 and 30 something year olds that are doing that. It's usually always a woman who does that, is the amateur sleuth. But I think it is evolving. I think it's becoming more edgier, and I think it's becoming for younger demographics. So you got to step it up in what's happening. And even at Penguin, when I was self-publishing, I never had any violence in my books at all because, you know, I was focused on what it's supposed to be. And when I got to Penguin, they said, oh, this is nice, but we need some drama. You know, we need something to happen. So I never wanted to write a character who was, you know, stupid enough to walk toward the room where the guy with the knife is, you know. I just don't think people should do that. So that was kind of hard, but, you know, it's evolving and it's changing. One thing I do like is that the setting is a character, I think, in cozy mysteries. You know, it's always a big part of it. Even, you know, the hook, you have to decide where you want to be. Like a lot of this is the Pacific Northwest. People are writing in Portland, or I don't know, your stories aren't in Seattle, but you're from Seattle. But I read another one, Emmeline Duncan, I think her last name is in Portland. So those things I like. And I think that's a big part of the definition of a cozy mystery, is that the setting is a character. And I have not gone to one live event, it doesn't happen so much here online, that there wasn't someone there who didn't know what a cozy mystery. So I run into that a lot. And usually if I'm just speaking, I will start out with a definition of cozy mystery. But I think I'm gonna have to, you know, assess that definition and probably update it.
Darci, what about you?
Oh, you guys have all said such great things, and it's really all true. For me, what attracted me to writing a cozy mystery, I didn't even really I didn't know that I had written a cozy mystery when I wrote my first one. But what I wanted, I love the setting as a character, and that is attractive to me. And I like that an amateur sleuth does. So for me, it's like more of an amateur person kind of fumbling their way, but cleverly, and trying to solve the murder before the professionals. And so for me, it's funny because like you guys were talking about, you know, the classical cozies like, you know, Miss Marple or, you know, those types of things that we all love. But when I started writing cozy mysteries, I didn't want to have anything to do with the historical, because I wanted to keep that separate in my life. So I wanted something very current and fresh. And I have kids that are in their, well, now they're in their early mid-20s. And I just use like the language that they could bring into the house. You know, I work with kids at the library, and I love that. I mean, they're dingy sometimes, but they're brilliant. And I wanted to key into that brilliant dinginess. And that vulnerability with a younger sleuth. So my first sleuth in my Cherry Mysteries was in her mid-20s. Now I'm writing about mid-30s. And it just trying to kind of make it for, I think, you know, like younger people read cozy mysteries too, because sometimes the YA stuff is a little edgy. I will even get corrected by my editor being like, you know, let's just take this word out. Like sometimes I'll describe a scene and put too much in it. And then they're like, no, this is cozy. Not that it's bad. It's just a little too descriptive, like one word too many, which I think is hilarious. I'm always fine with that. They know what the readers really want to read about. And I think it's up to us to kind of like tell our own version of it. So, but I love coming back to that familiar setting. That's why I started reading cozy mysteries. I love the unique characters. They have, you know, these really likable characters usually. I've never read a cozy mystery about somebody I didn't like or I didn't want to be have as a friend. And it feels like visiting a friend, and that comfort that you pick up with each novel, you know what you're getting in one way, and you're going to be surprised pleasantly in another way. So to me, the genre is that as well. It's just that familiar, you know, kind of a fun journey, trying to solve a mystery with somebody who's not trained to solve a mystery. And there's an enjoyment to that.
That's great. Rosemarie and Vince, do you have anything to add?
These answers have been fabulous. I mean, I don't know how much we have to add to this, because I think all the main boxes, they've already been ticked here, which is the amateur sleuth, the absence of violence, and the setting. Yeah. It's always very tricky when people ask what kind of books you write, because we initially, you know, going to what Darci was saying, we think of these primarily as historical mysteries.
Yeah,
I think it's safe to say, just because of when they're set. But going to what Abby said, I mean, setting is paramount, and these are books where our setting is paramount. And Paramount is essentially like the community where all of this is set. It's just that these are books where the neighbor who wanders over to provide a helpful piece of information might be Barbara Stanwyck. That's the big difference with our books. It's just it's a different class of neighborhood.
So you're pushing the edge too.
Yeah, actually, if you want to think of it, we'll take that, Darci. Yes.
Now that we've kind of defined cozies, for someone that hasn't read a cozy mystery, what do you think is the quintessential example of a good cozy mystery? This time we'll start with Vince and Rosemarie.
Well, I would say, just to kind of keep in our wheelhouse, books from back in the day, the Mr. and Mrs. North series. By Francis and Richard Lockridge.
Another married couple.
Because they're a married couple, so we kind of resonate with that. And they're urbane and witty, and just have that feeling of, you know, Manhattan being its own little town at that time. Yeah,
there's that I can't remember now what the line is, but they said New York turns into a small town when it rains. And that's what those books are like. You know, they've written mysteries where it's all just set in their building. And for people who don't know New York, that is very much a possible thing. And also they have cats named Gin, Martini, and Sherry, and we're in favor of that.
Totally.
Darci, what about you?
I'm sorry, that was I'm sorry, what was the question?
What do you think is the quintessential cozy mystery?
Thank you. I was just laughing at all the alcohol names of cats. It's so hard to pinpoint, but I do feel like it's that, for me, it would be the familiarity and the knowingness of that it's going to be, it's like you're not going to come into anything that's going to, you know, like startle, like violence, a lot of violence, a lot of gore. It's going to be, you know what you're getting with a cozy mystery, and it's usually a pleasant journey. And I do like the coziness, you know, because you always picture people reading this in a cozy setting. They're kind of beach reads, I would imagine, but maybe beach reads around maybe they do a little bit better around a crackling fire with a glass of, you know, maybe sherry or something. But they do have that small town, comforting feeling when you read them, but yet they challenge your intellect too. So
Abby, do you have a favorite that you recommend?
Well, I think even when you say quintessential, you have to say Agatha Christie.
yeah,
You know, so probably her first book. What is it? The
Murder at the Vicarage?
yeah, yeah. So I think, you know, even though some of her books have a detective, so it's not an amateur sleuth, although the detective, I guess, has retired or whatever. I think that when you think of cozy mysteries, that's what you think of. I think that, you know, people can't be as clever as Agatha Christie, because she could put some twists in there and you know, that you don't expect, and they're so simple until you think about it later. So I think that's what you aim for, is, you know, to follow the clues, and the clues are spattered throughout the story so that you can link them together. And so I think that that's where it starts, and I think that's where all cozy mysteries, even if people aren't familiar with it, with Agatha Christie per se, they just know about cozy mysteries. I think they all stem from that.
Olivia, do you have a particular favorite? We lost Olivia.
Oh, she's not, she's muted.
That she's mute,
Olivia, you're muted.
but we could all see visually.
You guys missed all my jokes. Okay. No, I recommend killer content. That's my recommendation. No, I mean, just look at this group. We've got ice cream cozies, we've got witch cozies, we've got library cozies, baking and lighthouse, we've got Hollywood. There's so many things that are going to appeal to somebody.
Mhm.
And if you're into baseball, there's baseball cozies. If you're into dogs, there's dog cozies. One of the authors that I absolutely love has a psychic cat, you know, and it's whatever draws you in and what you like. There's going to be a cozy for that, and there's probably going to be a lot of them. And that's what I always recommend to people. You know, if you like ice cream, you got to read Abby's books. They're great, they're hilarious, they're good cozies, and there's lots of ice cream in them.
Angela, how about you?
Well, I thought I was going to be the odd person naming a vintage mystery, but I'm not. I'm going to pull this out of my shelf here. Lately, I'll just tell you the mysteries I've been on a kick with, and that is Constance and Gwyneth Little were sisters who wrote mysteries in the 30s and 40s. And one thing that a lot of cozies have is humor. A lot of cozies are hilarious, and you're not going to find as many PI novels, I don't think, that are as funny as cozies. And these novels are screwball mysteries. They're hilarious. And Rue Morgue did reissues with heinous covers. That's why I pulled this mat back. It's not a mat back, but anyway, it's an old one from the shelf. But they're such good mysteries. I would say if somebody wants, and they're all standalones too. There's like 20 standalones. Somebody wants a good, funny, classic cozy mystery that mostly takes place in New York and the sort of Eastern Seaboard. Gwyneth and Constance Little, I recommend them.
That's great.
I have to say, if we're going to replace cozy mystery with anything, I think screwball mystery may be the way to go.
Oh,
I like that a lot.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Screwball is, yeah. And Delano Ames is another author that's sort of in that tradition. Hilarious, almost impossible to find now. Somebody needs to reissue those books. We should get together and make a collective, buy up the rights and reissue those books. And they're also a married couple, not that wrote the book, but that are the sleuths, and they're also terrific.
Yeah, and Craig Rice
Craig
wrote some
Rice.
Hilarious books.
Craig Rice is hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was, flat on her butt drunk for all the books that she was writing. But yeah, Craig Rice. Yeah, we could totally do a screwball reissue. You think Poison Pen maybe wants to host us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask them and see. Let's talk a little bit about process now, because when most people think of a mystery, it's got a structure to it. A crime occurs, the sleuth follows the clues, the killer is revealed. When you're writing your books, do you have a specific process, or is it more of a free form kind of thing? And we'll start with you, Angela.
Well, I I do plot for sure. I mean, to me, the puzzle is an important part of the mystery, and I just can't make it up as I go. Not that my plot is going to end up being exactly, in the end, the book will be exactly like the plot. That's not true at all. But I do sit down, I use sort of a 4-act structure, and I do plot. I try to get in some surprises, some good red herrings. I try to give every person in the book who is a name brand character in the book a secret and a potential motive or means or opportunity to be the murderer. And so I definitely do plot. The rest of my method involves coffee and spending some time at the computer. But yeah, I'm a plotter. And also, I think some people are super introverted writers and they do everything on their own. And I'm sort of on the border. I do have a couple of writer friends who I trust for discussions of, okay, now I think I'm in this corner. What would make this interesting? And so I do spend time with cocktails, usually, trying to figure out where the book is going to go next.
Olivia, what's your process like?
So I'm a plotter, and you kind of have to be when you're trying to do traditional publishing, because they want to see a 5-page synopsis before you get started. So you have to know. But before I can even start writing, I have to know who died, why they died, and at least 3 people who could have killed them. And at that point, I might start writing without knowing which of those 3 people actually killed them. But usually I know why they were killed and who killed them, and it helps me put the right people in the right room, because you're going to have the red herrings that Angela was talking about. You're going to run all over the place, but you have to know as the author where you want it to end. Doesn't necessarily end there, but you got to know what you want.
Abby?
So I always tell people, don't do what I do. I am definitely not a plotter. I'm a pantser. And so I can barely write those synopses that they ask for. And I just let them know. I don't, can you tell us, my editor just emailed me the other day and said, can you tell us, I have a new series coming out. It's called Books and Biscuits Mystery. And she said, for book 2, can you, give me 3 lines of what it's about? I told her, I don't know what it's about. Someone's going to get killed. And someone will find out who it is. So I just write by the seat of my pants, hence pantsers, of course. And I need to know who was killed, and everyone has to have a name, because they're not real people to me if I don't name them. So before I start, I need who was killed, their name, who killed them, their name, and why. And I usually go with 5 suspects, although they don't always fit in, because then I just start writing. And I can write a book in about 3 weeks. So, and I don't write it in order. I write chapter 1, and I usually will do chapter 1, but then all my other chapters are chapter next, because I don't know when they'll come next, because whatever I think of, I go, oh, that'll be good in the book. I put it all together. And then, I'm put the pages in different orders. And then I think, how can I bridge this chapter to this chapter? Because I like this. I got to get from, point A to point B. And then when I can't figure out, which way the characters should go, then I write the end with how they figured out everything. And I go, oh, that's how they figured it out. So I need to stick that somewhere that they found this or they saw this. And then I go back. And then I love writing community. So you can talk things out. And I have a writing partner. She lives in California. We've been writing together since 2013. We have never met. And we even wrote a book together at the end of the line. But we read each other's chapters. So I'll write 3 or 4 chapters. If I write them, I send them to her, and we get on the phone and she reads them. And if she writes, then I read them. So we see if we miss words or if things don't make sense. And that's all I look at. I never go back and read anything. After I go through that chapter with Catherine, that's it for me. Before we started, I had to read the back of A Game of Cones, because I thought, what is that book about? I never look at them again, because I'm so afraid it's like not good, and I go, and if I read it, I'm going to want to change it. So I just don't read it. So Yeah, I kind of work backwards. And then after I write the chapter, then I put what chapter it is. Chapter, after I write, and they're in a row, I write the chapter number in there. So yeah, it's just kind of, I don't know how it falls together. So, but it does eventually.
Darci?
I'm just getting such a kick out of that, Abby. That would give me a heart attack, and it's absolutely brilliant. So speaks to your brilliance to do it that way. Woo, made me nervous. And I do know what you mean, because as writers, we're always like a couple books ahead of the book that came out. So sometimes you do have to read the back of your own book to remember what it was. For me, for the mysteries, I do find it helpful to write those synopsises that the publishers ask for. And I never really done that before. So I got in the habit of really plotting. So I come up with like all you guys there, I come up with, you need to know who gets murdered and a motive for why. And it is weird, like walking around thinking about, why would somebody kill somebody? Like, and so I'd read books on how to kill people, scare my family to death. But I start out with that, and then, then kind of the whole thing kind of falls together at once in my head, and then I write it down as fast as I can in a smaller version, and then that's kind of my framework. And I vary, like sometimes I find something as I'm writing that would be better, but I think they know that. I think like editors know that when you hand them something, it's not always written in stone, but I do find it for writing a mystery as an essential guideline.
Vince and Rosemarie, this is especially interesting because there's two of you. How do you write a book?
Yeah.
These answers are fascinating, because we came into this thinking we're going to be the only plotters here, obviously, and that's not the case. It's actually really interesting to hear that. But you're right, John. Because we work as a team, we don't want to surprise the other one, so we plot everything out in advance.
Yeah, pretty detailed, right? Well, of course we talk, because it's the two of us here in the house, so we talk to each other constantly. So we'll be talking about the plot, we'll work everything out, write an outline, and then put it on cards, put the cards on the bulletin board.
That's the big change, is that when I was writing on my own, I could just write everything on, a single outline document and think I'm good. And Rose said, no. We're not doing that. You have a very visual approach.
Yeah, I think more visually, and so I really did need to see the cards out there. Okay, these are the different chapters, highlights for the characters that are in there, or the mood of the chapter, and then I can get really a feel for what we agreed on.
Yes, and I'd never approached it like that before, and I have to say it actually does change the way I look at the book. I found it really helpful to lay it all out like that, especially when you're tracking multiple characters. So it's like, well, this is an Edith scene, so it's on one color card. This is a scene with a celebrity cameo, because I don't want to bunch too many of them up. We do a lot of cutaways to newspaper stories or gossip columns, and it's great to actually just be able to see at a glance, well, how often are we checking in with these other sources, and do we need one in here? So that's actually a great thing that you brought to the planning process.
I thought they did it telepathically, because have you noticed before they say anything, they look at each other and then they say the same thing. So I just thought it was just like, we're going to write this book. And it's done. You guys
That's
are
what
great.
30 years get you.
Yeah, really.
That's awesome. I like that.
That's great. All of you have been writing for a while now. I want you to think back to when you were first starting out as a writer. What do you wish you knew then that you know now about the publishing business? And we'll start with you, Vince and Rosemarie.
Well, I would say that everything takes a lot longer than I thought it would to start. And I'm not sure why I thought that, but I just, maybe from movies or something I had in my mind. And not even the first part about getting someone to want the book, because that could take forever. But even just, okay, well, they have the book, and then you're going to get your editor's edits, and then you get the copy edits, and then they'll set a date for the book to come out, which in our case, they had a very specific time where they wanted to come out. So it was almost a year after we were done with it till the book actually came out. And so there was a lot of waiting, especially that first year.
Yes, and I would say somewhat related to that is to understand the importance of timing. Because one of the hardest lessons that we learned was that you could have everything you wanted to have happen. And if it doesn't work out according to the right timing, it kind of doesn't matter. We had a phenomenal run of luck where if you'd asked us when we started writing the series, what's the thing you most want to have happen as a result of this? We would have said, we want to go on Turner Classic Movies and talk about Edith Head and introduce movies. And we got the opportunity to do that. And at the same time that was happening, Nancy Pearl, who's America's librarian, put our book on the top of her summer reading list on NPR's Morning Edition, which for a genre novel is kind of incredible. And the only problem was this was all happening with our second book and not the first book. So while we're writing this great wave of publicity and everybody's congratulating us, what we're not telling them is the series has already been dropped. Like we thought it was to and through and that was going to be the end of it. We were very lucky in that another publisher stepped in and has kept the series going at Severed House. We're incredibly grateful to them. But what I wish I knew at the time was you have to focus all of your attention on the one thing that you can control, which is writing the best book that you can. And once it's done, you have to just let it go
and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, some people cannot move on as quickly as they perhaps should.
Some people it took a little while to move on. Yeah.
But yeah, we did get an important lesson out of that.
Darci, what about you?
Oh my gosh. And I feel for Rosemarie and Vance there because I have the same issue. What I would say is that the publishing industry is very fickle. And you get your first publishing, your first contract, and you're so excited. You throw your book of agents away, and you're like, never again, never query again. I seem to get 2 books into something, and then seem to have to change up what I do. So, and for me, that I get stuck. Like our books are like our babies, and so I was with Random House first, and they seem to love what I do, but timing is everything. It's like you say. My second work of historical fiction came out the day that Borders liquidated everything. And so where Borders was so good to me before with my first book, and Borders was good at the second book, but I was not allowed to do anything at Borders. And they, would have a nice display for my book, but at Barnes and Noble, they just shelved my book. Never, and that was part of the publisher issue. And I was so heartbroken because it was like a lesson to me. I'm learning so much, even writing a cozy mystery that I didn't know was a cozy mystery. You learn a lot in this industry. My first cozy mystery series had the same thing. It was just starting to do well and having some good luck with it. And I was writing the third one and people were excited and I was getting calls to go do fun things, publicity things. And my agent called me one day and she said, stop writing that third novel. The mystery house is just closing. Everybody's losing their jobs. So come up with something else. And that was how I came up with this. So, but it took me, it just, you can't turn on a dime when you're halfway through a project. So I have a lot of unfinished things and I'm not a person who likes unfinished work. So, but it is a fickle industry. You just have to like you said, concentrate on that thing that you can control, and that is your book. Mm-hmm. And just, I guess pray for the best, but be ready to reinvent yourself and come up with something new.
Abby?
So although I've been writing a long time, I'm new to, traditional publishing. So because I self-published first, and I just did that because I was sick and I needed something to do to keep my mind off of that. So I didn't start off thinking, oh, I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to, go down this pathway. And actually, I never thought about being traditionally published. I was doing a promotion for one of my self-published cozy books, and Henry Press, which is a small press, and they only do cozies, was having a giveaway. And I wanted my self-published book because you could get whoever entered the giveaway, they'd have to give their email address, and it was a way to build your subscribers list. So I sent my book in to see if I could get in the giveaway, and then they accepted it, but they wrote me back and said, we want to publish you. So, I never had to query for a publisher or anything. And then before the first book came out, an agent contacted me, emailed me and said, I'd like to represent you. And of course, I didn't think that was true because I had heard these stories about agents, you have to knock down their door to get in. So I wouldn't even answer. And I was telling my librarian, I said, I get all kinds of weird emails. You know, this one person wrote me and said they were an agent. And so she said, well, let's look them up. You know, librarians, they can put their finger on any book you need, you know, they can just walk to the shelves in this book. And it was a real agency. So I contacted her and I said, okay, so what do I need to do, you know, for you to be my agent? And she said, I'm going to send you a contract, just sign it. And then she, you know, got me a book deal with Penguin. So I didn't have to learn things. My librarian friend says, you know, I'm due for not getting something because, you know, I had that,
No.
I had that easy
No.
way.
You're charmed.
And that's okay. So I braced myself because she goes, you have had it too easy, and you know, something's not gonna, you know, fall in place. So, well, I'm ready for that too. But then that's life, so it's okay. But you know, so it wasn't me planning and saying I want to be a writer and I need to get a manuscript ready. I have never written a full manuscript for submission. I have never written more than like 4 chapters, you know, on submission. And I have 2 series with Penguin, and I have 1 women's fiction, trying my hand at women's fiction. I don't know how that's going, with Lake Union. And then I have a crime of the 20 authors of color. We wrote an anthology. And so I have those books coming out. So far it's been easy, and maybe that's a good thing that I didn't plan it, you know, because then maybe I'd be disappointed. So just kind of happened.
Olivia?
So Abby touched on this earlier, but by the time that you're promoting a book and seeing it on bookshelves, finally, you are 2 or 3 books down the road easily. And I've already turned in the next book in this series. It is completely out of my hands. I'm working on the book after that. And I never thought it would be like that. I thought, you know, if I ever had a chance to go to a panel like this, I'd be like, you know, oh, this book is about this. It's book, like Abby, it's like, I'm reading the back going, okay, that's what happened in this one. And I had somebody the other day mention the soap aspect, and I was like, oh no, that wasn't killer content. So the idea that you're always working on the next thing, and then you're promoting like something that you wrote 3 years ago, I never would have guessed that.
Angela?
You know, I feel that everybody has touched on a lot of the things that I've learned about publishing and wish that I knew. But one thing that I discovered that I guess I would have thought of, but I didn't really know until I started publishing, was how amazing book people are. Book people are great. Librarians, bookstore people, writers, just generous, funny, interesting, just enough nerdiness to make them fabulous. Book people are the best people. That's what I say.
That's great. And that brings me to my next question is, most authors are readers themselves and book lovers. So what have you read recently that you loved and would like to share with other readers? And we'll start with you, Angela.
Well, you know, I mentioned vintage mysteries, which I do love, and they're hard to dig out. And I mentioned already some of my favorite authors lately, Delano Ames and Gwenthan Constance Little and Alice. I'm getting old and decrepit and my brain is falling apart. But for something that is recently published, I loved the Moonflower Murders by Anthony Horowitz. It has a great feeling of golden age. It's wonderful characters. It's a novel within a novel, really interesting structure. And I read that book over the holidays, and normally I'll read a book and I pass them on, but this one I held on to, and it's about time to read it again.
Great. Olivia?
So I'm part of a writers group that is Berkeley debut adult authors for 2021. And I have had a chance to read some amazing books. I have my little shelf here, but I got to tell you, 2 of the best books I have read lately are Arsenic and Adobo and Dial A for Aunties. And these books are so fun. This is more of a traditional cozy, but it's a younger main character. Dial A for Aunties I honestly couldn't put it in a genre. I don't know if it's shelved as suspense at my Barnes and Noble. It's shelved it as romance at the next Barnes and Noble down the street. It's just funny. So if you haven't read those books, please go out and pick them up right now because they're really quite good. And then what I'm looking forward to, Abby mentioned it earlier, is the Midnight Hour anthology, which is authors of color and a anthology. Is it Abby Collette? Is that what
that one's Abby Vandiver. I'm just the editor. I'm the editor on that one. Yeah.
But it is something I have been waiting for. So I've got it on my pre-order.
Thank you.
If somebody wants to send me a copy of it early, you know my address.
I'll send you a copy. DM me, and I'll send you a proof.
Perfect.
Abby, what about you?
I forgot the question.
What have you read recently that you
Oh, so, so I'm trying my hand at women's fiction, which I think that I'm not going to do that anymore because it's just so much easier to kill people. You kill them, you figure out who it is, and that's the story. Women's fiction, they just ramble on through life. And so I had to do research, of course. So part of my research for women's fiction was to actually read some women's fiction books. And everyone else I know is saying about cozies, and maybe that's what you were asking, but this is the last thing in my brain because I still read lots of cozies and get ideas and research them. I read everybody's book, but I have been reading women's fiction. So the one I like, and I don't know so much if it's women's fiction, but it's Celeste Ng, Little Fires Everywhere. That was even her first book, so it's a little older, but it's just so fascinating. For one thing, it takes place here in Cleveland in one of our suburbs, which is only like 10 minutes up the road from me in Shaker Heights, Ohio. But she just writes about stuff that happens every day, and still you're turning the page like it's a mystery with all the suspense in it. So that's a book that I really enjoyed. And then on the panel, as I said, I read the books before the panel and I enjoyed them. So and was really amazed at some of the books, how they have such a different voice. I know it's going for a younger vibe now for cozy mysteries, but I don't know, there's this perkiness, even though it's seniors would be, perky and, have all the stamina for 90-year-old people. It's like fresh. So I enjoyed recent cozies of everyone that I read. So
Darci?
Oh my gosh, I'm a sucker for the British cozy, and I totally, that other question where I was supposed to recommend books. I started reading M.C. Beaton, who wrote Hamish Macbeth and Agatha Raisin. I've read all of those. That's why I started, because I was doing historical research, and so sometimes I like to read, or I always like to read, books in a country that I'm writing about. So I love those. And my last book I read, that I finished, was Heather and Homicide by Molly McRae. She has a really fun, cozy mystery bookshop. An American buys a bookshop in Scotland. So that's very fun. That was her latest one. And I do love, I'm really trying to read so much more cozies. I do kind of gravitate towards historical fiction, but I really enjoying everything by Barbara Ross. She does this wonderful Maine clam bake cozy mystery. Those are so fun. And my all-time favorite is the Domestic Diva series by Krista Davis. Those are just and so I'm still learning about the industry, obviously. So I'm looking forward to reading everything that you guys have done. So
Rosemarie and Vince?
Can I just want to jump in very quickly and follow up on one of Olivia's recommendations? She mentioned Arsenic and Adobo, and Mia, who wrote that book, she is one of the winners of the William F. D. Malice Domestic Grants, which is an award that the organizers of Malice Domestic, which is a conference that is dedicated to the traditional mystery and specifically the cozy mystery, gives to unpublished authors. And we were lucky enough to win that with Design for Dying, the first of the Renee Patrick books. And as Angela was saying, finding a community that supports you, the way we were welcomed by the Malice folks is really something that still amazes us. So if anyone is an aspiring cozy author watching this, that we can't recommend that program enough.
Yes, definitely a thing to apply for.
But the book you want to recommend?
The book I want to recommend is definitely not a cozy. Can't stress that enough. But I finished it recently and it just packs such a punch. It's called Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby, Sean Cosby. And it's, they just called a thriller. I don't know. It's a mystery. It's propulsive. It reads like a movie, but in a really good way because it's also very internal with the characters. It totally blew me away. Action, unbelievably written.
He's a phenomenal writer. We just got an early copy of his new book, Razor Blade Tears. We're big fans of Sean, so we can't wait to read that. We end up doing a lot of research writing, so the thing I'm going to recommend is a research book. Billy Wilder is a character that recurs in all of our books. He would direct some of the greatest movies that Paramount ever put out, like Sunset Boulevard and Double Indemnity. And there's a recent collection called Billy Wilder on Assignments. It's edited by Noah Eisenberg and translated by Shelley Frisch, that collects all of his earliest journalism back from Weimar, Germany in 1928, when he was, sort of a flaneur wandering the city and just reporting on everything that he discovered. And you read this book and you realize he was a director then when he was in his 20s and wasn't even thinking about going into the movie business. So it was such a treat to find all of that stuff collected for the first time.
Great. We do have a couple specific questions from those tuning in. The first one is for Vince. You mentioned that you were an editor at Noir City. Can you tell us exactly what that is and what Noir is for those who don't know?
How much time do we have for Vince to talk about Noir?
Well, unfortunately, as I mentioned, the organization that I work for, the Film Noir Foundation, was started by Eddie Muller, who was a host on Turner Classic Movies. You might have seen him this weekend as part of the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival, which is going on. I'm just going to steal his definition of what noir is, and that is, he's got two. The longer one is the character knows what they're doing is wrong, and they do it anyway. The shorter definition, which Rose and I like even more, is suffering with style. Because everybody in these movies always looks very good as they are writhing in moral anguish. And so we're very excited about that. But very quickly, the foundation is dedicated to the preservation, restoration, and most importantly, the exhibition of classic noir films. So we publish a magazine 3 times a year featuring some of the best film writers that are out there. We take all of the proceeds from that are donated to us and put it towards restoring classic film, which we then exhibit at film festivals that are all over the country. We have in San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Chicago, the Washington, DC area. We're adding more all the time. If you go to filmnoirfoundation.org, you can find out anything else you'd like to know.
Great. We do have a question for Olivia. Where did you get the idea to have Odessa be a thrifting sewist? And for those that might not know what that is, can you explain that?
So one of the things that Odessa does is she makes her own clothes. She doesn't have a conventional sized body, and she has a hard time finding clothes that she likes, especially clothes with pockets that fit a woman and are flattering. So she goes to thrift stores and she finds fabric that she likes and she remakes clothes out of that. And I don't know if you've ever bought fabric, but it's very, very expensive. And then you can go to a thrift store and you can find something that, especially something that might not even be in the best shape, like it's missing some buttons or it's got a hole in it that maybe might not be used, and then you can use it. I actually, I've done that a lot and make toys out of it. Like I've sewn bears out of like old flannel shirts that I've found at thrift stores. I've got a pair of pants that I love that is just nothing but like 30 different scraps of cloth from different shirts that I don't wear anymore. And they are atrociously ugly, but man, they're comfortable and they have pockets. So I figured I would let Odessa do something like that. And Odessa finds some material and she shows her new roommate how she can basically upcycle clothes that already exist and make it into something new and make it something unique.
A question we have for Angela is, are you still in love with perfume after the pandemic?
Wow. So well, people don't know, I've been writing for a perfume blog for about 15 years. And I also occasionally write for a French perfume magazine, Nay. And see that Chinese cabinet behind me is full of perfume. So that's some insider knowledge there. Yes, of course. I am wearing Relique d'Amour right now by Arisa Legrand, and it's incense with a little lily and beeswax. It's supposed to smell like walking in an old chapel. So yes, I love perfume more than ever. With nobody around, I can just let it rip. So yeah. Thank you for asking that.
Abby, the question we have for you is, what is your own favorite kind of ice cream flavor?
Chocolate with almonds. You want to be my best friend, just give me chocolate and almonds, and I will follow you around anywhere you go very happily.
And similar to that, we have a question for Darci. What is your own favorite thing to bake?
To bake. I do like making cherry pies. I like making, actually an yeast dough. Give me some yeast and some flour, and yes, the pandemic saw a lot of baked goods in the Hannah household.
Well, I can't believe our time is up. We've had so much fun chatting with all of our authors today, Angela, Olivia, Abby, Darci, and Vincent Rosemarie. I do want to mention at this point that we have copies of all of their books at the Poison Pen. We'd love to have you either go online or give us a call and order them. I know the authors would love that too. And without further ado, I'd like to thank our authors for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in, and come back again to the Poison Pen.
Thanks, John. Thanks so
All right,
much.
Thanks, John. Thanks everyone at the store.
Here too.
Yeah, thanks everyone.